الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم اكتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. سبحانك لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. أنت المقدم وأنت المؤخر أنت على كل شيء قدير. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل التفرق بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تدع فينا شقيا ولا محروما. In the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most compassionate, the most merciful, we praise and thanks are due to him, and peace and blessings be upon his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He who is guided by the will of Allah, no one can misguide him, and he who is misguided, no one can guide him except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jawad, نرجو اللي يحب يسكر الباب لو سمحت معلش. جزاكم الله خيرا. طيب, respected brothers and sisters, Eid Mubarak for all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your deeds. Last time, just a quick reminder, basically what I do, that I mention just parts, main titles of what happened last time, just to connect you and to keep all of ourselves on the track. Last time we highlighted very quickly part of digging the well of Zamzam. If you remember how Abdul Muttalib, he was, he saw this kind of dream, he insisted to that, this kind of dispute happened between him and the rest of Quraysh in the way what happened with them. Then they admitted for him that the one who helped you to bring the water from under your camel while we were approaching death, literally, definitely wants you to have this kind of honor of having, if you remember that, okay? The story of, because, by the way, why we are mentioning all of these things? From one angle, academically speaking, giving you the context. From more specific reason is what we call in our Islamic terminology, irhasat al-nubuwah. Irhas means the prayer indication of something. Irhasat al-nubuwah, the prayer indications of the preparation of the coming of the prophets. Now, Prophet Muhammad is the grandson of Abdul Muttalib. Okay? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored Abdul Muttalib by the fact that he was given the honor, Zamzam was completely missed through hundreds of years. They knew that Zamzam happened to be somewhere there. They knew from their ancestors, hundreds and hundreds and maybe thousands of years ago, Jurhum, when they came with Ishmael or Ismail, that the reason that Jurhum came to settle down in the area of Wakka was Zamzam, Aslan, because it was just a desert. The reason why Jurhum came and, the whole story of Hajar and Ismail was because of Zamzam. They saw the water, they know, but it disappeared. We don't know how, when, 1,000 years, 900, we have no idea. So when he saw the dream, and when they noticed that while he was digging about to approach the tip of the well, they say, as we say in Arabic, we should share this well. If the water could come at any moment, we are from the offspring of Jurhum and Ismailiyya and Adnaniyya, so it's not just for you. They have this dispute. For us, we know now that it was a preparation of honoring the lineage of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was given this honor to have the dream, even though he was not a believer. He was given the dream. Then he was stronger placed. Then he was giving him the victory from one angle. Last time we highlighted as well, and I will focus today part of my talk about the lessons of Abraha. You remember? The main idea of Abraha. Abraha was a very powerful Christian ruler. He was ruling Yemen. Came from Abyssinia, Al-Habasha. At that time, Abyssinia was a very, very powerful kingdom, Christian kingdom. So this Christian ruler, politically and militarily, he was in a very high status. He knew that Arabs in the Arabic Peninsula, Yemen is part of the Arabic Peninsula. Yemeni people, they are Arabs. The rest of Arabs in general, the most sacred place for them was Mecca because of Kaaba. So from religious point of view, political point of view, authority point of view, whatever point of view, he was feeling very bad. How come Arabs, they are looking with a high prestige and honor to Kaaba, even though they are supposed, from his point of view, they should be coming to his, church. So he built a very huge church, and it was called historically Al-Qullais. I have no idea about in the Christian heritage what they call it. In our Arabic, it was called Al-Qullais. Okay? It was huge. So, and he started forcing the Arabs. When I say forcing, sometimes they can use political reasons, sometimes military reasons. Like now, we have some Western countries, they know how to force others, not necessarily ethnic groups, okay? So many ways politically to force others. So some Arabs, they felt very bad, and they do something very bad inside the church. As if they go to the washroom, they did something very bad inside it. It's a sign as, hey, we don't care about you. So he felt very angry. He prepared a huge army, and he went there to destroy the Kaaba. And last time, all of these things, it was in what we know as Am al-Fil, and it was mentioned in the Quran. One of the most great things that we need to highlight, two big messages. Message number one, by instinct, by nature, Allah created us. When we respect something highly, such as sacred places, sacred books, religions, when we respect parents, families, homeland, we are ready to die for it. It's by nature. Therefore, Arabs, even though they were pagans, they started fighting Abraha, even though they were worshipping idols. They were paganists. Yet, the inner nature of protecting the sacred places was there. This is an indication that whatever happened to you from faith point of view, still the inner nature, humanly, creation that by default from Allah still is there. That's why we are able to speak with atheists, with non-religious people, with agnostics, with skeptics. Still they are. We share with them, I will not say the human, we share with them the original divine status. Because Allah, by the way, just pause outside of everything. Unless Allah has built inside us a common thing that we can share, how come a believer will address an unbeliever but what we call a common sense? How did it happen to be common? Common by whom? By the origin of the creation. Are you with me? Or an unbeliever? And by the way, just to give you another example, outside of everything, one of the amazing proofs that Allah does exist, the common things that we share, including the language. I will just give you, maybe it will be shocking for someone. Now, do we acquire language by nature or by education? Why you kept silent?
Both.
Right. When you want to translate from a language and language, do you understand the other language without being taught and educated? So we acquire language by? Maybe I will shock you with this. By the way, language is a divine built-in thing inside us. We do not learn languages. You know what we do? We learn new sounds, how to express the origin language. Or otherwise, it's impossible to translate. I will explain to you. Now, for example, in Arabic, if I want to do what I say at-ta'keed, the affirmation, the confirmation, we use ways of at-ta'keed. One of the ways to do ta'keed, which is the affirmation of something, the repetition. Like for example, Wallahi, 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 inni ba'izzak. By Allah, by Allah, by Allah, you mean a lot for me and you're very close to me. The repetition as a way of affirmation is a built-in system. Okay? What we learn in Arabic, we say, for example, Wallahi, Wallahi, I repeat it. In English, I repeat, for example, I say, by God, by God, by God. Now, the concept of affirmation, which is I repeat something to tell you that I want to confirm this, is a built common thing between you and me, or otherwise you can't understand me. Now, the concept of name, noun, verb, proverb, inside, when I say a name, is the word that it describes something without a time. In Arabic, الاسم لفظ يدل على شيء غير مرتبط بزمن. The sound for you, لفظ يدل على شيء غير مرتبط بزمن, as a concept is exactly the same, a noun or a sound that tells you about something which is not related to a time. But the realization for the concept, it's a built-in, or otherwise I can't translate. You got my point? So therefore, the concept of fa'il and maf'ul, the concept of subject and object, it's a built-in realization by Allah. Well, it's impossible to translate. Like exactly, if you want to translate your language between you and, for example, let's say an animal, there is no common realization. That's why sometimes we create some signs because there's no common language between me and him, or between me and the insects, for example. Ants. Sulaiman was given something in you from Allah, but you and me, I realize, okay? But just I start to realize that when you want to speak about Allah, you say, for example, God or Khuda. What do you say in Urdu? Khuda, for example, okay? Khuda, Allah, 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 or whatever. But we all are talking about the same concepts here and there. Why I'm saying this? I'm saying this just to tell you, when we address some people about the truth, the realization of the truth is there, regardless of the language. Allah created, or otherwise, how Allah will establish the argument against us in the Day of Judgment. How come that many people, they become Muslims without knowing Arabic? Just by knowing the concept from the translated version of the Quran. It's not the Quran, by the way. Yani, fiqh, from fiqh point of view, the translated version of the Quran does not, we don't call it Quran. Quran is described just for the Arabic one. This is called the translation. So not direct language. Yet, they realize what? The concept. Anyway, my point was, even though they were paganists, for us, mushrikeen, yes, but still they are maintaining the origin, realization of the truth. Part of it, the values, protecting sacred things. That's why, you remember that kind of traitors who helped Abraha, and they helped him as spies to tell him exactly how to reach the Kaaba, because at that time, no way, no GPS, no highways, no signs. Abraha could have been lost anywhere in these thousands of miles in the deserts, unless the traitors, Al-Khawan, helped him. By nature, by fitrah, they realize that this is wrong. So you need to know, whatever, whenever, still there is good and bad. It's not a relative thing. There is right and wrong. Don't accept ultimately anyone tells you this is your point of view. La habibi. It's not always my point of view. There is a truth and falsehood, always, in many cases. Or otherwise, by the way, is this a water or this is my point of view? But seriously, can anyone claim now that this is your point of view, that this is a water? I'm asking seriously. Is this a water? Water, this water? To the best of your knowledge, is this a water? Yeah. Why are you laughing? If someone can say, excuse me, from my point of view, this is tea.
Maybe.
Here comes the tricky ways of misleading the people. This is a water. ورجلي فوق راسي. Untranslatable. Because non-Arabs will not understand it. ورجلي فوق راسي. طيب. And quick reminder of the last thing we said last time. ألم ترى كيف فعل ربك بأصحاب الفيل ألم يجعل كيدهم في تضليل وأرسل عليهم طيرا أبابيل ترميهم بحجارة من سجيل فجعلهم كعصف مأكول. Have you not seen, O Prophet, how your Lord dealt with the army of the elephant? Mentioned literally, the army of the elephant. Okay, in the Quran Kareem. Did he not frustrate their scheme? For he sent against them flocks of birds that pelted them with stones of baked clay. Each bird, in his beak, he was holding one, stone, clay, fire. And so three of them. قال حجارة من اللهم صل على محمد سجيل. Directly goes like the bullets in our woods against each one of them. So many of them, they lost their lives. Leaving them like chewed up straw, or thus he made them like eaten leaves. Right. This was, let's say, most of what we have highlighted last time. Now, let's go back to some of the lessons that I want to start my lesson today. Let's go back and highlight, because as I told you, this is not an entertainment session. This is a session of ilm that we build basic concepts how to enjoy understanding our religion. I need to keep reminding myself and my respected brothers and sisters, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, that we believe that Islam is the final version of Allah's constitution to humanity. الدستور النهائي الخاتم من الله لعباده. It's not for Arabs or Somalian or Pakistani, for all of them. So it happened by the will of Allah, not because you are better or I am better, that most of us, we were born Muslims. However, Allah honored us by having this gift. So we need to convey this gift to others, because the property of Islam is not ours. يعني ليس ملك الإسلام ليس ملكا لنا. None of us owns Islam. Be careful. So we don't have racism in Islam. Islam is not for Arabs. Islam is not for Somali people. Islam is not for Pakistani people. No one can claim Islam is mine. No, any moment I could commit something entitles me to be an unbeliever. I'm outside the fold of the religion. And any mushrik, any kafir, any non-believer, any skeptic, any whatever declares the shahada, in 1 second he will become what? A Muslim. And he will be enjoying and fully entitled of everything in Islam. And I will be outside of the fold of religion. So, it's the religion of Allah. It's part of our faith. So therefore, it's our duty, from one angle, because as we say, فَاتِلُ الشَّيْءِ لَا يَعْطِيهِ. The one who does not own something cannot give it to others. So it's our duty to let others know it, but by default, you can't let others know it before you know it. How come? Or وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. May Allah, God forbid, the concept of where Allah has described a group of people in the Quran كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا, or, God forbid, may Allah protect all of us not to be from this example. Allah described a group of people who are holding the knowledge without understanding, just being proud of, okay, we have this, do you know what this is? Who cares? Like donkeys who are holding volumes of books of knowledge, but they have nothing to do with this. كَمَثَلِ الْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ, it's Allah's Quran. Exactly like the donkey holding asfar. Asfar means the big volumes of books which contains ilm. But the donkey has nothing to do with that. So that not to be, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, may Allah protect all of us not to be from this example. We need to realize, we need to understand, we need to comprehend, we must live. Actually, I urge you not just to live, but to be proud. You need to enjoy. And it's impossible to enjoy and to be proud without thorough, deep understanding. It's impossible. So that's why, please focus on every simple detail that we are highlighting, whatever it takes you the time, and go and read. Now, let's go back to Abd al-Muttalib. When Abd al-Muttalib came to Abraha, if you remember, I will recite, I will quote some of the ulama talking about what happened between Abd al-Muttalib and Abraha. One of the ulama, I think Al-Ghazali or I forget, or Al-Buti, one of them, because I'm reading for 6, 7 ulama all the time, I'm just quoting from here and there. So one of them said, الحقيقة المعركة بين الله وبين أعداء الله. The real battle is between Allah and the enemies of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared on the tongue of Abd al-Muttalib at that time, when he said, قال سنخلي بينه وبين البيت فإن خلى الله بينه وبين البيت والله ما لنا به من قوة. You know, Abd al-Muttalib, he said, أنا رب هذه الإبل. Do you remember? He said, I am the Lord of these camels. But Allah is the Lord of the house. If Allah wanted to protect His house, it's His decision. We can do nothing with you, which means we are hopeless. He's admitting that we have nothing to do. Now this discussion, this is like a message for us. I repeat, it's a very important message. The deen of Allah is protected by Allah. Your job is to do your best to be from those who are close to the deen of Allah, and to be ready that Allah might use you, insha'Allah, to be from the soldiers of Allah in protecting the deen of Allah. Allah decides when, how, why, but you be ready. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. Let me give you just a simple example from this story. This discussion between Abd al-Muttalib, Abraha, and Allah's, plan in this. This is my example now. It's like you and me, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. You have decided that you want to, we are living, for example, in the GTA now. Now we are in Oakville. If you want to go to Niagara Falls, for example, for us, let's say, north, south, west, whatever. Let's imagine that we have train outside now. It tells you, this book, it tells you, the train comes at any moment. Be ready, holding your bag or your personal properties. At any moment. This is the message. And you will be taken for free. The only condition, you must be next to the doors, ready. Next comments. Doors of the train will open just for 15 seconds. Either you get in or راحت عليك حبيبي راحت ايش عليك. You know this? It's either you get in on time, but I don't know when. Be ready. This is your job. Your job to be what? Ready. Like, at what time will come? I don't know. Definitely, and it will open for 15 seconds if I'm not ready. This is a simple example. Let's imagine that a train will come generally in my life 100 times, an average 10 times a year. And all the time I'm busy sleeping, playing, wasting the time. And every time the train comes, I say, still I have another time. Now, last notes, at any moment, your ticket will be cancelled. You have no right to get into the train. When you take all the conditions, your job is what? To manufacture the train? To maintain the train? Well, your job is what?
Be ready.
To wait for the train to be ready. This is exactly our relation with Islam. Be ready to serve Islam when Allah calls you. Part of it, understand your religion. Be proud of it, live it, be ready, and Allah will use you in the best place if you want, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. طيب. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. Now, let's take some of the lessons of Hadith al-Fil, this kind of event of al-Fil. One of the amazing things, Ibn Kathir, the very well-known Mufassir, he was referring to, amazingly. Sometimes we say lessons. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born exactly 50 days after the event of Ashab al-Fil, 1 month and a half. So at that time he was in the womb of his mother. He said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not protect Mecca at that time, Prophet Muhammad could have faced it through his mother to be enslaved. Because the culture of people on the earth at that time, an army is attacking another place, city, whatever. All captives will be prisoners and will be what? Slaves, females and males. So can you imagine? So it's the irhas of protecting Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Protecting Muhammad. His mother could have been, will be born as a slave by a Christian ruler. So part of the irhasat, the previous indication of Allah's plan in protecting His da'wah, to protect all the people of Mecca, including Amina bint Wahab, which at that time was holding inside her womb Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another pose. At that time, who on earth could have an idea about what's happening in the future? Yani, can you imagine anyone has any access to the ilm al-ghayb, that at that specific time when Abraha was attacking, please pause now, try to imagine, try to picture this, go with your imagination now. Mecca, which contains the Kaaba, it's mixed with pagans. Actually, pagans, they were fighting Allah because they were committing shirk against Allah. True or false? Now, literally, superficially, do they deserve to be protected? They are fighting Allah. They are mushrikeen. True or false? Do they deserve to be protected according to the general rules? No. But at that time, no one knew that there was a prophet inside the womb of a woman living amongst them, sitting there in her room. But Allah knows. He is the one who has decided to do so. So, from one angle, a phenomena happened. What's the phenomena? Birds came from the sea, contained stones, everything was finished. Why? Who knows? Coincidence. Are you with me? Pause. Go to, I always make the mistake, south of Italy, Pompeii or Bombay? Pompeii. Pompeii, صح? Bombay in India. You know, Arabs, they have a serious problem with P and B. You know this. So even when we want to memorize the P and B, and by the way, one of the ways that I trained myself how to control the P and B, do you know how? Can you give me a tissue? I will show you how I used to train my students after I trained myself. B, 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 P. Seriously, wallahi, if you want to train. The P is where hams. P, P, B, 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 P. B, P, P, B. You see? So sometimes I'm confused. So Pompeii, huh? Pompeii in South Italy. Go and read about it. They were doing some certain things. One of the biggest volcanoes in the history of humanity. Millions of tons of ashes came with the temperature of thousands of degrees, like clouds, and they were turned into statues of stones. Coincidentally. Coincidentally, it's by the will of Allah. It's by the will of Allah. We need to know this. My point. Now, because we know at that time what used to happen, because now we are living in 14th or 15th century Hijri, we knew and we are reading, it was revealed, the Quran. But at that time, no one had any simple glimpse of idea about what Allah read. But what's the message? Don't ever lose the trust in the power of Allah. How can I get benefit from this now? Now, from one angle, is Islam the most targeted religion on earth or not? Yes or not? Yes. Is it true that the majority of mainstream media on earth attacking Islam with a reason or without a reason? Is it true that many other cultures, they have disasters, no one cares in highlighting their problems, yet this simple problem happens by any Muslim on earth is enlarged and maximized or not? Do you know that 75% of refugees on earth are Muslims? Do you know that the majority of Muslims, they don't enjoy any kind of their natural resources in their countries? Do you know, yeah, so we are suffering, yes. If someone came to say, where is Allah? Be careful, Habibi. What could be the wisdom of Allah? Habibi, just please be careful, respect yourself, please. Now, this is a huge plan for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to know the following. You are part of a big test. Okay? Who knew? How many of you know that exactly the time of the collapse of Andalus? How many of you knows that Muslims ruled Al-Andalus as an Islamic state for 800 years? Do you know that? 800 years, from 97 Hijri up to 897 Hijri, which is the full collapse of Granite, which is Granada. About 500 years from now. The collapse of Andalus came immediately. The Ottoman Empire was at the beginning of its rising. But 600 years, Muslims, they were one of the mightiest powers on earth. If you want to judge Islam through what happened in Andalus, be careful. So don't judge the fact that Muslims are very weak now, khalas, it's finished. Nah, baby. You and me, we judge events, our personal events, by months and years. Nations by decades or centuries in Allah's, plan. Now what's the point? The point, take a listen. No one could have, ever thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was trying to bring a prophet at that time when this happened. But it was a preparation. Who knows why all of us we are here? 90% of us, we speak excellent English. Those who love their religion and they start mastering the skills of English, don't know, maybe English language will be the main language of spreading Islam on earth in the coming 70 years. And you, in the age of 20s and 30s, who are listening to me now, could be the grandfathers of the generation who will let 70 or 80% of people on earth will become Muslims. This could happen, I don't know, I'm just putting an expectation. طيب واحد بيقول لي شيخ طب do you know if an earthquake happens 1 week from today and all of us we passed away? Yes, this could happen. I told you about the train. Be ready. The conditions. The idea is, your intention was, Ya Allah, if you kept me alive, I will do my best to support your cause. If this happened, I will reward it. But what if I passed away before doing anything? What will be activated now? my intention will work the role of giving me the high status as if I have done everything, even though I have done nothing. That's why Imam Bukhari put the first hadith in his Sahih was what? إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. طيب. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. Let me go to another point now. I want to quote اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد, one of the scholars saying, I will read in Arabic, then I will give you some of the lessons that we can take from protecting Al-Kaaba by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال لم يقدر الله لأهل الكتاب أبرهة وجنوده أن يدمروا البيت الحرام أو يسيطروا على الأرض المقدسة حتى والشرك يدنسه والمشركون هم سدنته ليبقى البيت عتيقا من سلطان المتسلطين مصونا من كيد الكائدين وليحفظ لهذه الأرض حريتها حتى تنبت فيها العقيدة الجديدة حرة طليقة لا يهيمن عليها سلطان ولا يطغى فيه طاغية ولا يهيمن على هذا الدين الذي جاء ليهيمن على الأديان وعلى العباد ويقود البشرية ولا يقاد, وهذا من تدبير الله لبيته ودينه. The scholar of the Sheikh Ali Salabi is quoting another scholar saying, one of the great messages that we can conclude from the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected his house, even though, by the way, in the literal calculations, Christians are closer to Allah than the pagans, because they are the people of the book. But Allah was preparing his baits to be completely freed from any kind of authority or interference or any kind of power, to make it completely with full freedom, so that this new religion will, come out of any kind of authority that will, do any kind of influence in it, to give the full, let's say, freedom, to have the full power without any kind of, effect or influence. Now, one of the great things they said, قال لأن هذا الدين جاء ليهيمن على الأديان. This religion, Islam, came to have the superiority, came to have the super authority upon everything else. So therefore, Allah prepared the place to be completely with full freedom without any kind of influence, so that when it will be established, it will be very powerful. So they used the word قال يهيمن على غيره. So when the word yuhaymin mentioned, it came to my mind where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the word yuhaymin. If you remember in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَمُهَيْمِنًا عَلَيْهِ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ أَهْوَاءَهُمْ عَمَّا جَاءَكَ من الحق لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا. We have revealed to you, O Prophet, the book with the truth as a confirmation of previous scriptures and supreme authority on them. You need to know this as a Muslim. Because many people, because of the relations, the human relations, studying place, traveling, having just bits and pieces of knowledge, things might come mixed. You remember when we started the tafsir durus, we knew some of the stories in the Torah, very similar to the stories in the Quran. So what's the difference, ya Sheikh? Big difference. The fact that you have some similarities does not mean you take this or that book as your reference in any way. It's not allowed for you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to you to tell you that this book was revealed to you, O Muhammad, the followers of Muhammad. Now, confirmation of previous scripture and the supreme authority. But how come confirmation and supreme? Whatever is remained in its original status without changing and corruption, confirm. If anything has changed, the last say, the supreme authority for Islam and the Quran. So be careful when you study. Be careful when you compare. So judge between them by what Allah has revealed and do not follow their desires over the truth that has come to you. To teach to each of you we have ordained a code of law and a way of life. If Allah had willed, the rest of the verse. Now, this is part of the history. Now let's go to another part of what happened to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. This happened while he was in the womb of his mother. You remember that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he was taken for the breastfeeding at the very beginning up to the age of 2 years by Halima al-Sa'diyya. And there are a lot of details how Halima al-Sa'diyya, all of his life was changed, full of blessings, barakah. You know, she used not to find any kind of milk inside the goats and sheep. Out of a sudden, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, as a young child on a breastfed, time, came, everything was full of barakah at that time. Right. One of the great stories that happened, and we have hadith sahih in Muslim about that, I need to highlight it and to take lessons from it. When you go and read in the Seerah, the sahih sound Seerah, you will read about something called, in our terminology, hadithatu shaq al-sadr. Tough secular Muslims will find it very difficult to grasp. Non-believers, they will not accept it. But don't forget, we are talking about resources that is authentic for us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that He sent to us the Quran and the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So part of what happened to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was confirmed. He said it after he became a prophet. So we have more than one narration about this. One of them was the Prophet Muhammad told Anas bin Malik himself about this later in Hadith Sahih narrated by Imam Muslim, which is when he was very young, about 2 years plus, hardly just able to run and scream and shout, still very young boy. His brother, which means the direct, genuine son of Halima, because being on breastfeeding means the mother has given birth. If she has not given birth, she can't give milk. So the fact that she was giving, breastfeeding, it means she herself had a kid. So his brother came out of a sudden to his mother, Halima, very scared. Very scared. What happened? He said Muhammad was killed. He thought that Muhammad was killed. So Muhammad at that time was just 2 years. Very, very, very young. So when the father and the mother, Halima and her husband, came to him, he was crying, so scared. What happened? He said, 2 men came to me and they laid me into the ground and they opened my chest and my heart and they took something from inside. Can you imagine? What? So they thought something happened to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were very scared, so they didn't know what to do. Then they, even though they were insisting to keep him, they took him immediately, returned him back to Amina. I will skip many details now. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in a hadith, I will narrate it exactly now. I will quote it from Sahih Muslim and I will explain it. Then I will tell you what could be, highlighting the lessons from this. And why we have this in our knowledge. Why do we know this? Why Allah did this make to happen? He was at that age. قال قد روى الإمام مسلم في صحيحه حادثة شق الصدر في صغره عن أنس بن مالك. Anas is the narrator. He said, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أتاه جبريل وهو يلعب مع الغلمان. The archangel Gabriel took him while he was playing with the kids. قال فأخذه فصرعه. He took him and he put him on the ground. قال فشق عن قلبه فاستخرج القلب فأخرج منه علقة فقال هذا حظ الشيطان منك ثم غسله في طست من ذهب بماء زمزم ثم لأمه ثم أعاده إلى مكانه وجاء الغلمان يسعون إلى أمه فقالوا إن محمدا قد قتل. Now the text literally says that Jibreel came to him, he put him to the ground, he opened his chest, he took his heart, and then he took just a small piece of that, and then he cleansed and cleaned the heart with like a bowl of gold, contains the water of Zamzam, and he said, this is the share of the Satan from you. It was cleansed from that, it was real back, exactly like surgery in our time. Now we as human beings, do we know people, they go to hospitals and everything is open in their bodies or not? Are still alive, and sometimes the heart is outside for 17 hours, outside completely. You can see the heart outside because of science, subhanAllah. 200 years back, 300 years back, 400 years back, can the people imagine how could this happen? They can't. Because they have not seen, they have not witnessed it. Now we are doing it. But the fact that now we are doing it, it's easy for us to realize it. But what if we are not able still to realize it? We claim it's lying. Because our ability to grasp the meaning, is it impossible? Is it impossible? No, we are doing it now. They have an open surgery for the heart and for the kidney and for the lungs and sometimes for 20 hours, 25 hours, completely out of conscious still, and few hours, few days later, as if nothing happened with them. How do we do this? By the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This happened? Yes, happened. And by the way, do we need still the science to prove it to us and somehow to believe in it? Be careful. We've been told this since 1400 years, that this happened. We don't know the how, but it happened. خلاص. نقطة. That's it. Or maybe this is what. But what if 200 years ago from now? Wallahi, we don't know. Because I can't imagine it. You and me are not the criteria to imagine what Allah is able to do and how to do it. This is from one angle. Now, قال يكمل أنس قال أنس وقد كنت أرى أثر المخيط في صدره. You know the impact of this. You know he did exactly what we do with the medical surgery. بالطب شو يسموه الخياطة الطبية؟ Stitches. You know exactly because Anas say the remaining of the stitches on his chest. I used to see it. The impact when we have a surgery, you can tell after years that still there is some kind of the remainings of the stitches. You can see it somehow. The color of the skin, the nature of the skin, the texture of the skin. It tells you that something happened, an injury, something, a surgery or whatever. Anas used to say it. Technology at that time has nothing to do with that. It happened, yes, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, that's it. And this is preparation for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قال أنس فقد كنت أثر. Now the الصلابي says ولا شك أن التطهير هو من حظ الشيطان. التطهير من حظ الشيطان هو إرهاص مبكر للنبوة وإعداد للعصمة من الشر وعبادة غير الله. It's like a preparation to be protected from the shaitan. Dr. Al-Buti, I want to quote his very beautiful quotation about this. قال يبدو أن الحكمة من ذلك إعلان أمر الرسول تهيئ للعصمة والوحي منذ صغره الوسائل المادية ليكون ذلك أقرب إلى إيمان الناس به وتصديقهم برسالته. إنها إذن عملية تطهير معنوي لكن اتخذت الشكل المادي الحسي ليكون فيه ذلك الإعلان الإلهي بين أسماع الناس وأبصارهم. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the scholars, Sheikh Al-Buti, in his book about Seerah, he says Now, Allah could have done this easily, directly in His will, without us knowing anything. Simply, Allah, إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا يقول له كن فيكون. If Allah just said be, and it is, and that's it, خلاص. But why He sent Jibreel alayhi salam, and Jibreel alayhi salam, He put him to ground, and He opened his chest, and He did this, and He cleansed, and it was narrated, and in Hadith Sahih. Why? You know, for us to make it simple to understand, sometimes Allah does visualize some certain things to make it easy as an information, as a concept. Or otherwise, Allah could have done everything without any kind of simple picture or anything to realize it. For us, we have a limitation in our realization. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes does this to make it like a declaration that I take care of my beloved ones in my own way. This is one of the ways. Pause. I will give you another example now. Apart from all of this, is it, now when we say, when you do tasbih, you will gain ajr. SubhanAllah, 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 SubhanAllah. When you do istighfar, you will gain ajr. True or false? طيب. When you recite the Quran, you will have hasanat. True or false? طيب. Is the case, can't Allah give me ajr and hasanat without reciting, just by my niyyah or not? Is Allah in need for my voice to say SubhanAllah, 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 SubhanAllah? Does Allah need this kind of sound? خلاص, let Allah do it, وخلينا جالس محله. Let's me just sit and do nothing. No. Allah created us in a materialistic world. Part of us is the material and the realization and something. It's like a system. This system contains your spirit, contains your intellectual power, reason, and contains your body. It's like a harmony between many things. You need a system. You need something to remind. You need something to do. You need Allah could have created all of us living without any need for food and drink. Yes or no? But He created the system in a way, if you do not go and eat, to eat you need to go and plant seeds, and you need to buy, you need to work, you need to do, otherwise you will die. He could have created you in a way, you don't need any kind of food or drink, yet He created you. It's part of the whole system of testing. And He put you in a certain conditions to keep pushing you to do many things with your own will, realizing and understanding what is good and what is bad. So it's the will of Allah. It's very complicated. We can keep mentioning tens and tens and tens and tens of examples. Why Allah decided to? Because He decided to give us a lesson. That's it. Because He can do it in this way and other 1 million other ways. You know why I'm highlighting this? Because I know some people, when we teach, you keep asking, but why this in that way? You give him an answer. But why this in that way? I mean, Allah could have done it in many ways. He decided to do it in this way. Please close the file, take care of yourself, be ready to meet Allah. Because keep arguing for the sake of reaching to nothing will not benefit you. Is it clear, the points? Right. This is part of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, I need to pay your attention to something. I don't know if I have time to highlight it, but it's good. While reading in book of Salabi, Jazakallah khair for the tea, brother, there was an Orientalist, his name is John Nicholson. John Nicholson, one of the English British Orientalists, who was born in 1809 up to 1886. More than around 130 years ago from now, he passed away. He was an Orientalist. I will explain now what do I mean by Orientalist. When he was commenting on this Hadith al-Sadr, the opening of the heart, he said this is part of the legends and the myths, khurafat wa asatir of Muslims. They want, to make this kind of great stories, ambiguous things like Hollywood, around, or Bollywood is Sahih. This is Bollywood, not Hollywood. Hollywood is very humble compared with Bollywood. Is it B or B? B? Bollywood مشكلة يعني. Bollywood, huh? You know, Bollywood is beyond imagination. Because you see an Indian man who's holding about 1,000 machine gun, and he's using all of them once against an army with 5 million people. Sometimes you start laughing because it's even your imagination is not able to accept it. So Mr. John Nicholson is claiming that this is part of the myths of Muslims and religions. So I stopped by this, I thought, because I read that he was. I need to just pay your attention to the concept of Orientalist, and I finish my story today. So. Orientalism, Orient means the East, Sharq. Orientalism is a terminology, special terminology, means a group of scientists who were interested to study the affairs of the East. By default, the East for them, and they are the West. They are the center, everything in the East. The East compared with the West could be applied in theory, academically, on what we know now as Middle East, South Asia, China, Arab. All of us, we are East for the West. Later on, this terminology developed. It became more or less very focused on Muslims. The roots of this term started 12th, 13th century. But the very powerful movement of this movement, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century. So you see Orientalists, you need to know the following. Now Orientalists, most of them, 90% of them, they are from the West. In specific, the most well-known scholars of them, they came from Britain, France, Spain, Holland or Deutschland, Germany, you know, these countries, more or less. Now, Europe in general, then some of them Americas. Now, Orientalists, to the best of my knowledge, and I have written some research, academic research about this, can be classified as the following. Out of every 100 of them, 70% of them, they are Christians. 20% of them are Jews. 10% of them are free thinkers seeking the knowledge. This is very important to know, because we are focusing on the areas of 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, the most and biggest writings that people are influenced now with, and they have reproduced them again. They were written in 18th, 19th century. Now, their academic title is Orientalists, those who are interested to study the affairs of the East. Practically, 70% of them, they are what? Christian missionaries. They work with churches and their countries. Okay? Practically, not all of them, but the big majority of them, they are working in collecting information and studying the affairs of Arabs and Muslims. Somehow, whether they knew or not, they were working like, in our terminology now, intelligent forces for their political countries. On top of them, French and the British. So, when you come to someone like, for example, Margoliouth, Goldziher, Samuel Zwimmer, Alfred Guillaume, Montgomery Watts, Louis Massignon, Margoliouth, Nicholson, Goldziher, all of those, they come from these countries. The majority of them, they were studying Islam, average 20, 30, 40, 50 years sometimes. Some of them, they were focusing on hadith. Some of them, they spent all of their life, 40 years of their life, just studying the Seerah. With me? Some of them just the tafsir. like called Seerah. Some of them just the Seerah, or focusing on the Seerah. Now, one of the main parts they want to study. They were reporting to their churches and their countries. Their countries, as colonial powers, they were using this information how to deal with Muslims and how to occupy Muslims, and how to control their countries. But what I'm interested in, the intellectual parts. One of their main job, when you study their book, unfortunately, they were misleading their leaders. Their leaders back home. Now, for them, when they study, they have tons of proofs that this man highly could be a prophet. But if he's a prophet, let's consider following him. Following him means they will lose everything back home. Right. If this proved to be the truth, and our people behind us discover that truth, we will lose our power. This is now when you mix politics with academics. And by the way, now we live this in. When you go, for example, big companies like we'll have, for example, like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and other kind of hard soda. We have a big conflict in the media about, is it true that the sugar inside these things scientifically is not harmful and harmful? They, in many cases, some big companies, they are ready to pay money to mislead what? The public opinion. And they are ready to pay a lot of money to make fake researches or fake results to influence the people or to mislead the people, or otherwise they will lose their what? Their power, their control, their authority, their money. So the same thing at that time. Big, huge, long history of conflict. Crusades. Have you heard about the Crusades? Hurub al-Salibiyya. 8 big campaigns with 200 years. 200 years of attacking from the Europeans against, Arabs and Muslims in what we know now as the Middle East. They had two main targets. Target number one, they want to punish Muslims, the infidels, kuffar yani, and they want really to give a big lesson for the Orthodox Christians, the Arabs, because they're not following the Catholic thing, because they were heretics. So this is before. Then later on, the colonialism with Orientalism, with missionary groups. So they started. Now you need to know when I say Orientalism, because I will mention this. Now, one of them, they search. In our resources, this is an authentic. You need to understand it as we believe it in our terminology. So this is authentic for us. The way it happened, in light of faith, happened as a message from Allah. Now for them, if this happened by God to this 1400 years ago, it's an indication that he's a prophet, it's a big problem. So they need to claim something else to make a lie. This is simply a myth. What's a myth? I decided as Nicholson that this is a myth. Because they were lying and they want to do it, and that's it. The problem for us, not a problem. When someone who has no knowledge and he has not started with a basic solid knowledge in Islam reads this book with the notion that, mashallah, this is an academic piece of information. Some scholars believe that this could be a myth. What will happen to him? You know what we call in psychology the inferiority complex, uqdatun naqs. Many people, they have it without even knowing that they face it, because scholars in the West, they don't lie. Now, Afwan, excuse me, who told you that they don't lie? Any scholar could lie at any moment. Why you have this kind of God? Because this is what you've been told and you've been convinced and brainwashed. So that not just to reject anything, khalas. No. We have political reasons and we have invasions, we have a lot of reasons for people to mislead you. So don't just take it. It's good to know. This is when I say the word Orientalism, it's good to know these names now. For example, by the way, when we talk about, I told you 70% Christians, 20% Jews, 10% what? Free thinkers, some of them. So the majority of them, they kept doing this work in the last 2 minutes. Some of them, they become Muslims after they studied. One of the great names that you need to, and sometimes we have a just Orientalist. They studied, they did not make lies, they were so, let's say, just in their researches. I will give you 3 from the just, good Orientalists who stayed on their religions, but they were really, really very academic and just. They did not make lies when they read the text. One of them is Anna Mary Schimmel and Karen Armstrong and Goethe. Goethe is a German. Karen Armstrong, British. Anna Mary Schimmel, I think, a German as well. Karen Armstrong, she has many books about the history of Islam. Very nice. She's a woman. Now, from the Orientalists who declared Islam after they studied, one of them is Leopold Weiss. His Muslim name is Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad has a very well-known book called The Way to Mecca. He was a Jewish Orientalist from Austria, Yehudi Namsawi. He became what? A Muslim. And he wrote, and by the way, he has a very nice book about Islam. His name is Muhammad Asad later on. And we have Marmaduke Pickthall. Marmaduke Pickthall is a British, aristocratic, very rich British. I think about 150 or more years he lived. He was so rich, was spoiled, living, these kind of big aristocratic, big, British families. So he wanted to study this kind of ancient languages and hieroglyphic and ancient Egypt. So he came to Egypt to study this kind of, people in the West, especially Egypt, for them is it's a big attraction location. So he came to Egypt to study these ancient things. He, somehow came close to Arabs and Muslims. He knew the Arabic language. He was genius in the languages. Easily he picked up the language. He loved, subhanAllah, the culture of the Egyptian Muslims. Then he decided to become a Muslim. Then he wrote his tafsir. His tafsir is one of the most famous tafsir of the Quran Kareem in English, by the way. Marmaduke Pickthall. Yes. Marmaduke Pickthall. It's in English, very powerful English. And by the way, I don't advise you to read it, because it's written for the high level of English people. For our community, I prefer for you to read Mustafa Khattab, Father Sulaiman, Muhsin Ali Khan, for example. It's very similar to our terminology. But if you are dealing with some expert in English language, born as an English, his style of English is so high, give him Marmaduke Pickthall. It's one of the highest in his style. But this is the second part. Next time, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept us alive, we will comment on the fact that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam worked for a while in his life as a shepherd. Ra'i lil-ghanam sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The main reason is to understand all of the context before he became a prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Jazakumullah khairan. I have 2 minutes. Just one question if there is a question. Jazakumullah khair. Shall we pray the Isha? Tomorrow we have our 42nd, I think, lesson in tafsir, inshallah. You are most welcome to be with us. Jazakumullah khairan. Allah